Hello and welcome to this lesson on a monopoly. A monopoly is going to produce where MR equals MC right there, but since they're a price maker, they're going to charge up to the price that consumers are willing to pay, which is up there to the demand curve. Since the price charged in this example is more than the ATC, which would be right there, then they're making a profit because at the profit maximizing quantity, the price that the product is being sold for is more than the average total cost to produce that product. How do we calculate how much of a profit? Well, their total revenue is the quantity produced times the sales price, right there. Remember, they're charging up to the demand curve, so that would be the sales price. And the total cost will be the quantity produced up to the average total cost per item, which would be right here where it touches the ATC. Since the total revenue is 42 and the total cost is 30, the profit will be 42 minus 30, which gives us $12 of economic profit. In this example, the monopoly is going to produce for MR equals MC again right there, but since the price charged up to the demand curve, right there 7, is less than the average total cost per item, which would be over here to ATC, that's 10, this monopoly is going to be making a loss. However, since the price that's being charged is more than the average variable cost curve, then they're going to continue to produce. How much of a loss are we talking about? The total revenue is the number of items produced times the price per item. Remember, up to the demand curve for the price per item. That gives us $42. The total cost is the quantity produced up to the average total cost per item, which is 10. That gives us a total cost of $60. So the total revenue minus total cost gives us an $18 loss. But remember, this monopoly is still going to continue to produce because the selling price of the item is above the average variable cost curve for that item. Here we have another example where again the monopoly produces for MR equals MC right there. That's the profit maximizing quantity. And this is the price they're going to charge up to the demand curve, which is going to be 7. Since the price charged is less than the average total cost, which in this example is 20, then they're making a loss. And since the price charge is also less than the average variable cost for the item, then this firm is better off shutting down production temporarily and taking their fixed costs as their loss instead. So the total revenue won't be price times quantity right here because they're not producing anything, they're shutting down. So their total revenue is actually zero. Their total cost is not the quantity times the ATC because in this example, they're shutting down and the only cost that they're paying is the fixed cost. Now remember, the fixed cost is the average fixed cost times the quantity. So that's going to be the average fixed cost. Another way to get that will be the ATC minus the ABC, which gives us an average fixed cost of 10. And you multiply by the quantity to get the fixed cost, which is $60. Since this firm is going to shut down production, they are only going to pay the fixed cost, which is only $60. So their loss will be their total revenue now, which is nothing because they're shutting down, minus their total cost, which is just their fixed cost since they've shut down. So they're making a $60 loss for this monopoly. Let's look at efficiency right here. So a monopoly is not allocatively efficient because to be allocatively efficient, the marginal cost has to be the same price as the demand for the item. But they don't produce at that level. They produce for MR equals MC right here, and then they charge up to the demand for the item. So they're producing less than the socially optimal quantity of demand equals the marginal cost. They're underproducing. So they're not allocatively efficient. They're not producing where the firm should produce to meet society's demands. Instead, they're producing here where they maximize their profits. A monopoly here is also not productively efficient because to be productively efficient, you have to produce at the lowest cost, which will be the lowest point of the ATC curve right there. So that's where the firm should produce to be have their lowest cost, but it's actually producing here where MR equals MC. So they are producing at a level not at their lowest cost, so they're not productively efficient. So a monopoly is not efficient. It's not allocatively efficient, and it's also not productively efficient. A monopoly here is also going to show us the benefit to consumers, producers, which would be the monopoly, and society as a whole. Since they're producing at this level, the profit maximizing quantity, and then charging up to the demand curve, they're charging a higher price than they should be charging at demand equals MC. So the consumer surplus is going to decrease since they're charging a higher price than they should be. Consumers are not happy about that. However, the monopolist is very happy because they get to charge a higher price than they would have otherwise charged. So they're able to charge a higher price. So producer surplus is going to increase. However, the additional producer surplus does not take up all of the lost consumer surplus because they're underproducing what they should be making. So they're producing less than what they should be making. This is going to lead to deadweight loss or a loss of total surplus to society since the monopoly is underproducing and charging a higher price than they should be charging. The last thing we have to talk about here are natural monopolies. Natural monopolies occur because of economies of scale. And this happens because at the socially optimal quantity, this firm has decreasing costs, which means that at the socially optimal quantity, they're actually able to produce at lower costs than maybe some other firms. So they are the rightful ones that should be making this product. However, they are still a monopoly. So we call it a natural monopoly, even though they have the lowest cost going downwards at the socially optimal quantity. That's all for this lesson. See you next time.